Any of you guys remember what school was like? It was an actual place in the world where you would go and sit down in a crowded room full of other people and listen to a criminally underpaid slave of the education system try to explain something for an hour. You could actually sit less than 6 feet apart from somebody and not worry about ending up in the ICU the next week. Oh, how the world has changed.
Oh, hell yeah. Wow. Big school.
Could you imagine that? It's been a month since the last time I've been in a classroom, and now my state has just gone and canceled school for the rest of the year. Let me take you all on a trip to the past, and let me regale you with some tales from the pre-apocalypse. School Stories Edition. Physical education is by far the worst class in school. At first it seemed fun. There's a period where you don't have to actually learn anything. That sounds wonderful. And its intentions seem quite noble as well, encouraging the increasingly obese youth of America how to make fitness a lifelong habit. Physical education fails at everything it sets out to do. PE is perhaps the single most destructive environment possible for encouraging unfit children to actually start working out. It's necessary to predicate things by saying at the beginning of 2018, I was incredibly unfit and unathletic. I could barely keep up, yet every time I was yelled at by my teacher to hurry up. It did not help one bit that 2 out of 3 times a week we had PE after lunch. What kind of absolute sadist thought that was a good idea? You're left with 2 choices. Go hungry, or try not to eject your intestines out of your face while your teacher yells at you to run faster. What are you gonna pick? What I do not understand is why there are only 2 types of PE teachers. They are either the absolute peak of human fitness or about the same shape and size as the planet Jupiter. And there is no in between. Just don't even get me started on the locker room situation. Who thought it was a good idea to force 24 teenage boys to strip down to their underwear in a shared, cramped environment? Have you considered how creepy and weird it is to grade children on stripping down to their underwear? Don't even get me started on showering. What kind of sick person thought it was a good idea to get a bunch of teen boys to strip down naked, junk out and everything, in a public shower, just a big old open space with shower heads, no stalls, no curtains, nothing? Why? Whose idea was that? In school, we had to take a music class, and as many of you know, I cannot sing very well at all, so you can imagine just how well that went. Every year, we had to participate in 2, count them, 2, all-school concerts, and they were not very fun to do. We did one before Christmas and then one in the spring. And I can say that the near universal consensus among everybody in the class was that it was the worst part of the school year. For the Christmas concert, all we did was sing songs, and not any of the fun Christmas songs like what you might hear at Ben's Tuba Christmas concert. Nah, we sang about Jesus and stuff, and that's like no fun. What we did is that we were all packed onto these things called risers, and each grade had to sing like 3 songs in front of an audience of exceptionally bored-looking parents who didn't want to be there either, but they had to be there because it was mandatory. You had no choice whether or not you went because it was 50% of your grade. The real MVP here is all of the parents who sat through 3 hours of watching not at all talented middle schoolers try to sing Handel's Messiah. They could be doing other more fun things like smoking legal marijuana, but instead, there they were. At least the kindergartners were cute to watch, but you could not say the same thing for whoever this guy was. And to think there was once a time where I tried out for choir, and unsurprisingly, I got cut. Little did my poor tone-deaf self realize that I wasn't cut because the teacher didn't like me or anything. It was because I was bad. And I'd like to think that music teacher was doing everybody in the universe a service by cutting me from choir. Honors English was a magical experience. It's how Dickens' Review was conceived after all.
Alrighty.
There were considerable shenanigans that happened, let me tell you that. I'd even planned to make an entire video on it, but it got stuck in production hell and was scrapped. Catherine and I even went to the graveyard to film some scenes for it.
Alright, we're filming.
There was that time I got stuck under a desk. I'm not gonna give you any context or explain how it happened. It wouldn't make much sense anyway. I had to read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens freshman year, and I absolutely hated that book. It was the single most terrible book I have ever read. Let's just say I had great expectations for that book because it was written by supposedly one of the most highly regarded authors in the history of the universe, and it let me down. I'm starting to think that lots of these books are regarded as classics solely because they're old and a bunch of old white people in a room thought they were good. And if there's one thing that has been hammered into my mind over the past few years, it's that the judgment of old white men is entirely wrong and should never be trusted. I think maybe we need to read these books as an example of what not to do when writing a book. If I'm ever in England, I'm gonna do my happiness on his grave. Another thing that Honors English taught me is a very important life lesson. As long as you're not plagiarizing, you can do anything to get a good grade, no matter how illegal it is. I cannot tell you how many violations of US copyright law I have committed just doing my thesis paper, and I dare the feds to take me down. You can't stop me.
For legal reasons, this is a joke. Please do not use this against me in court.
As we've switched to online school, we've begun to hold classes through an application called Canvas. It was developed by a company called Instructure. On the surface, it seems innocent enough. But as you dive deeper and deeper, you come to realize the reality is far more sinister than you would first believe. Look at its logo. Just look hard at it for a second. What do you see? What does it resemble? Keep looking. Do you see it now? Canvas's logo is a coronavirus. When Instructure developed this app, they knew exactly what was going to happen and what kind of business it would attract for your company. In 2018, the company raked in millions of dollars in revenue, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough, for the greed of corporate America always prevails. It leaves me with one and only one rational explanation for it. This is a conspiracy, an inside job. The virus, known as SARS-CoV-2, was developed by Instructure as a biological weapon. Its aim was to force schools to close and conduct their lessons and activities through their platform. Is it beginning to make sense now? They released their weapon in the city of Wuhan, China, in order to distance themselves from their actions. If it were released in an American city, say Salt Lake City, it would be far too easy to determine who is responsible. All they want is money. The corporate machine knows nothing but money and greed, to the point where they'd unleash a pandemic upon the world just to line their pockets. But that's just a theory. Again!